Welcome to the review of lab practical number 1. I'm just going to be showing you what you saw on the test and then providing an explanation of what those bones and bone markings were. So number 1 was the ulna. This is the medial bone of the forearm. One of the distinguishing characteristics of this is you'll see this kind of C-shaped notch here, and that is basically at the posterior. If you palpate at your elbow, this is one of the ridges that you're feeling within the elbow joint there. So this is what forms the hinge joint at the elbow, and this process is called the olecranon or olecranon process. It fits with the olecranon fossa of the humerus. Number 2 was the scapula. You can't see the sticker here, but I had a sticker just on the table, a green sticker with number 2 on it. So that is the scapula, commonly referred to as the shoulder blade. I did not accept shoulder blade. Number 3 was the subscapular fossa. In my lecture video, I basically went over the markings on the scapula that were on your lab learning objectives. And if you see this flat, sort of concave surface here at the anterior view of the scapula, you know that is the subscapular fossa. Number 4 was the glenoid cavity. This is where the head of the humerus forms the joint at the pectoral girdle. Okay, number 5, this is the trochlea. If you take a look at our articulated skeleton, you'll see that this part of the humerus articulates with the ulna. And then number 6 is the bicipital groove, otherwise known as the intertubercular sulcus. It's just this groove between the greater and lesser tubercles near the head of the humerus. And also, my first class that came in, the first section of that class, my sticker was a little bit ambiguous. So for that first half of my 8:30 a.m. class, I would have accepted a greater tubercle as well. Number 7 was the acetabulum. This is where the head of the femur fits in with the bones of the pelvic girdle. And number 8 is the pubis. I would have also accepted pubic bone. This more rounded part is the ischium. That's basically what you sit on when you're sitting in a chair. The more pointed is towards the anterior. That would be the pubis. Number 9 was the talus. And number 10 was the cuboid. These are all tarsal bones. So I accepted half credit for tarsal for either of those, but I was looking for the specific names for those bones. Number 11 was the frontal bone, or just frontal. Number 12, you see the arrow here is pointing towards this little hole, that is the mental foramen. And number 13, the bone that's in blue here, is the zygomatic or zygomatic bone. Number 14 is the manubrium. So I didn't accept sternum because I was asking for a specific part. This whole structure is the sternum, but this part in particular is the manubrium. Number 15, for the specific vertebra, this is the axis, otherwise known as C2, cervical vertebrae 2. I would have accepted either of those. Number 16 is the dens. So this projection here is what forms a pivot point. It joins up with C1 or the atlas bone superiorly, and it provides a pivot point. So that's the only vertebra that has that superior projection there. Number 17 was the spine of the scapula. For full credit, you had to specify the name of the bone, so spine of the scapula. Number 18, infraspinous fossa. So this kind of flat area underneath the spine of the scapula is the infraspinous fossa. Number 19, this is a bone marking within the sphenoid bone. This is known as the sella turcica. Turkish saddle is what that literally means. And this is where the pituitary gland sits. And then 20, pointing to this hole, this is where the spinal cord and the brain meet. So the contents of the central nervous system, if it's sitting in the actual cranium, is the brain, and as soon as it exits the cranium, it becomes part of the spinal cord. That is the foramen magnum. So foramen means whole, magnum, large. This is the largest foramen in the skeletal system. Number 21, looking just for the name of the bone, this was the radius, so this is the lateral bone of the forearm. And number 22 is the head of the radius. So one of the ways to remember this that I mentioned in class was a radius is associated with a circle. The head of the radius is very circular. So that is one way to remember that that is the radius. Number 23, this was just a rib in isolation, and I was asking which end of the rib is this. So there's two possibilities here. It could be sternal or it could be vertebral. And this just has to do with which end is joining up with the sternum via the costal cartilage, or which end is articulating with the thoracic vertebrae in the posterior. This is the vertebral end. One of the reasons you can tell is you have these little projections here, little tubercles. This is a point at which this rib will actually articulate with the thoracic vertebra. And then it's kind of cut out of the picture, but the other end is quite abrupt. It just has this rounded edge, and that's where it will grade into the costal or hyaline cartilage that meets up with the sternum. Number 24, what type of vertebra is this? This is a lumbar vertebra. These are the heaviest, most robust vertebra of the vertebral column. So it has a very large, heavy body, and it will have a short, kind of hatchet-shaped spinous process. Number 25 is the spinous process, so that's the projection, basically the bony prominence that you can feel along your back if you were to palpate that. Number 26, what type of vertebra is this? This is a cervical vertebra. It is neither the atlas nor the axis. One of the indications that it is a cervical vertebra is because of this bifurcated spinous process. So it kind of has a little notch there. Another indication is that you have these transverse foramen that you don't see with any other vertebra. It's also fairly small and light, and it has this kind of triangular vertebral foramen. So that is a cervical vertebrae. Number 27, this is the xiphoid process of the sternum. So again, I was just asking for the specific part that the sticker was on. That would be the xiphoid process. Number 28, this is the transverse process. And these structures you see here, these are representing the spinal nerves. Number 29 is the ilium. This is the largest bone of the pelvic girdle. And then number 30 was the anterior superior iliac spine. This would be the anterior inferior iliac spine. And this structure up here would be the iliac crest. Number 31 is the sacrum. So this is the structure that consists of, on average, 5 fused vertebrae, and it is inferior to the lumbar vertebrae, and it forms the posterior of the pelvic structure. Number 32, what type of vertebra is this? This is a classic thoracic vertebra. So it's going to be intermediate in size between the lumbar and cervical vertebra. And one of the distinguishing characteristics here is going to be this kind of downward pointing spinous process. Number 33 is the parietal bone. Number 34 was the lacrimal bone. Alternatively, some of you may have seen a sticker pointing to this suture here, and that was the squamous suture. Number 35, I would have accepted phalanges or phalanx. So remember that for all digits, there are 3 phalanges. So this is on the proximal most phalange. This is one of the phalanges. And then this is another one and another one. So all of the digits of the hand, with the exception of the thumb, which only has the 2 phalanges, all of the other digits are going to have the 3 separate bones that make up the phalanges. And then the bone back here, that's part of the metacarpals. And then this grouping of bones back here, these kind of irregular shaped bones, those are the carpals. Number 36 was the tibia. This is the weight-bearing bone of the leg. Number 37 is the lateral malleolus. So this is the projection on the lateral bone, the fibula, that's non-weight bearing, so 38 is fibula. Number 39 was the lesser trochanter, so this structure here. This would be the greater trochanter. And then finally, number 40 was the head of the femur. Okay, so that wraps up my review of lab practical number 1. I'll let you all take a look at your graded tests when we get back from break, and of course let me know if you have any other questions, and I hope you're enjoying your time off from classes.